Well, we're here today in conversation with Audrey Weatherall, and Audrey is a longtime Valley resident. Could you tell us a little bit about where you were born, Audrey, and the years leading up to the time when you finally came to the Valley?
Yes, I was born in Windsor, Ontario, and we moved to Ottawa when I was 4 years old. And my father was a landscape gardener, and he worked for the American Embassy. And my mother did housework. And in those days, you had to have, help in order to make your income. Well, it's still the same today, even, so yes. And I was the oldest of four. hmm And no, I met my husband when we were in grade school. We were together from grade 3, and he used to ride me home on the handlebar of his bicycle, and he always called me the runt. And so we got married just after the war ended. He was overseas during the war. He was in the Navy, and he was only 16 when he joined up, and was overseas and back before he was 17. And he was torpedoed during the war and had his foot all blown apart. So he had quite a time of it. Spent a lot of time in Scotland in the hospital, and we were married and built a house in Ottawa, just outside of Ottawa. And he worked in the plumbing trade. He learned the plumbing trade. His brother owned a plumbing shop. And then it isn't the best working in family business, so he decided that he'd like to go west, and see what he could do out here. So he came out to Coaldale, Alberta, and they were putting the water and sewer into the small towns all over Alberta at that time. And he got there, and 6 months later he had rented a house, and he sent for me, and I came out on the train with 4 kids.
Mm.
And it was an interesting trip, and but a good trip, and they were excited to see their dad. And we settled into Coaldale and made lots of friends, got to know a lot of the Mennonite people, and wonderful people. And my kids started school there, and then we moved again because the work changed as the years went on. He had to go somewhere else to get work, and he was working a lot up in the northern part of Alberta. But then we moved to just outside of Calgary, had a farm just outside of Calgary, and at Midnapore. Enjoyed it there very much, except that it was so windy all the time. And my husband was working at it's a lodge just outside of Field.
Oh, West Louise Lodge?
Yeah.
Or Wapta?
Wapta.
Yeah.
And he worked there. He put the plumbing all in those cabins that are on the side hill.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, my dining room chairs all came from there, because they went bankrupt just when he was finished working. They couldn't pay him, so he got 7 chairs out of it. That was it. But in the meantime, he had been cruising around the valley here and met Harold Milam, and he really loved the country. It just really got to him. So he cruised around and met Harold, and Harold told him about the place at Donald and across the river on Wise Man Road. And so he went and looked at it and tried to find out who owned it, and then it tells you all about that in my piece, which I didn't know anything about.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden he came back home to Alberta, and he's telling me about this wonderful place, and unbeknownst to me, he had already made arrangements to buy it. So anyway, the next thing we knew, we were moving. But at our place at Midnapore, we had lots of animals, and I had 5 children then, and so anyway, before we knew it, we were moving, and here we go into our stay at Donald. We, like I say in my notes, that I was so surprised because we didn't have any power or any running water or anything of any luxuries at all, and it was an old log house, which had been the courthouse in Donald at one time. And they had floated it across the river and brought it to where our farm was, and set it up there, and it was cold and no luxuries at all, but it was a wonderful place to raise kids. And I realized that as time went on and became accustomed to it. But we were 7 years without power. And it wasn't an easy life by any means, with children and animals. But it was obviously a very comfortable life, because all the kids in the area, if they got the opportunity to jump on the school bus and come to our place for supper, that's what they did. And you never knew how many kids would get off that bus. And their parents would come and get them after supper, because they all knew that they were very welcome there, Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we lived there for, all those years, for 22 years. And my husband passed away there, and he got cancer, and he was very sick. And passed away, and then I moved into town. And this is where I am now. I've been here in this house for 37 years, and had a good life here with my family. The youngest girl was Nora. She was 12 when we moved here. So, they've grown up here, and they've gone to university from here, and it's been a good life for them. My son has the plumbing business here. He inherited that, and has continued to operate, and we have a good life.
Yeah, for sure.
You know.
Could you tell us you said earlier before we started the camera running that you had 10 children. Could you tell us who they are and maybe a little bit about them, like where they are today?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yes, my oldest son is Leo, and he's 67 years old, and he operates the plumbing shop, which his dad started originally, and we used to run the business from the farm at one time when we first moved here, and it's a good business, and he does a good job, and he's married, and he's got one daughter, Kim, and she has two girls, Megan and Madison, and Pat is his wife, who is a nurse at the hospital. Yeah, and they live a good life, and are very Golden is their home, Yeah, and he's very proud to live here, and he's a good son.
Good.
And then there's Mickey, Margaret, and she's 65, and she just lives 2 blocks away from me and is very kind to me. Her husband is Gary, and she has a daughter, Tracy, and Tracy has a daycare, and is very well known in this town, and runs a good business. And no, Mickey's very good to me. She cooks dinner every Sunday for me, and I appreciate that. And she looks after everything for me, and she just retired. And yeah, they're a happy couple. Her husband is very good to me. He does lots of favors for me. And then there's Keitha, and she's married to Kelly, who is a minister, and but he's retired from the ministry now, and they live in Vancouver, and they have one daughter and a granddaughter, or grandson, I should say. This is him here, and and yeah, he's working in Vancouver, not in the ministry, but in his accounting. He is an accountant by trade. So no, they have a good life too, and they come and visit all the time. And then there's Suze, who lives in Revelstoke, and her husband is Granger. He was Department of Highways. He was the bridge manager for many years. He helped build the bridge at Donald, and they consult him every once in a while. He's retired now, but he did a lot of bridge work all the way through to Alberta. And they have two sons, Keith and Jeffrey, and Jeffrey has a daughter. Suze has one grandchild, and Suze, who's next? Jenny. She's married to Leif Nelson, and they have two daughters, Leah and Stephanie. And Stephanie lives in Calgary, and she has twin boys. And Leah lives up in Prince George, and is married. And her husband is, oh, I can't think of his name. I haven't seen him for so long. But anyway, he's a motorcycle mechanic.
Okay.
Yeah, a very nice fellow. And Ginny and then there's Walter, and Walter's married to Carol, and they have two sons, Russell and Tony. Sorry, three. They have, and the other one is Robert, and he lives in Kamloops. And he's retired. He was a backhoe heavy-duty operator for many years, and he's got bad arthritis, so he's pretty crippled up. And yeah. And then there's Jeffrey, who lives in Lethbridge, and he's married to Doug Hudson, who has one son, and Doug was a magistrate for the city of Lethbridge, and he's retired now. And yeah, they're getting ready for retirement, for the days when Jeff is just counting off the time till he retires, and they do a lot of traveling and, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then there's Belinda, and she's 52, yeah. And her and the youngest daughter, Nora, they own and operate a daycare in Calgary. They both live in Calgary. They have a daycare where Tracy learned her trade. Mm. And they keep, Belinda's husband is Tom, and their last name is Christmas, which is kind of an interesting name. And the two girls are married to two brothers.
Oh,
Belinda's married to Tom, and Nora's married to James. So they're the two Christmas girls. And Belinda has two boys, Tommy and David, and they have no children. So there's no grandchildren or great-grandchildren there. Then there's Nora, who is married to James Christmas, and she has two sons, Brett and Jamie, and the daycare is operated mostly out of her home, but, which keeps them very busy. And they come a lot to visit, and all of them come back and forth a lot. I see them. So, yeah, and Nora was born when we lived at the farm, and Belinda was just 8 months old when we moved there. And then I have an adopted daughter, Marianne, who lives in Airdrie, and she's the same age as Belinda. They're just 6 months apart, and she was my brother's daughter, who came to live with us from the time she was 8 months old. And we raised her and adopted her, and she's got a daughter, Tashina, who lives in Calgary. So that's a lot of them. I lost one baby when we lived in Coaldale. So I still had 10.
still have 10.
That's a few.
It's a big family.
I'm not certain if we mentioned the names of your great-great-grandson and his mother from Vancouver.
Oh, Holden. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Holden and Kelsey.
Okay,
Mhm.
just wanted to make sure we got
Yeah.
all the names.
Yeah, okay, I didn't realize that. Yeah, Kelsey and Holden. Mhm.
None of your children took after you by having large broods of their own.
No.
They're all small families.
They all have, yeah, just two kids each.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Or one.
Or one, yeah. Yes. I know that over the years, you and your husband both were involved in some great things in the community. Your husband was really well known for his barbecuing skills,
Very well.
and he did all kinds of community events and
Yes, he did. He enjoyed it very much. That was his hobby, as he called it. Yes. And no, he was a very, very generous man. Out at our farm at Donald, our door was always open. He used to pick up hitchhikers off the road. When he'd be coming home from work, somebody'd be hitchhiking. He'd pick them up, bring them home. We'd give them supper. They'd have a bath. They'd sleep the night. The next morning, they'd have breakfast. I'd make them a lunch, and he'd take them back out to the highway again. And you know, we never ever had a minute's trouble with anybody. They were all good people, respected my family, my kids, and there was never any problem at all, you know. And some of them were pretty rough characters, but we never had a minute's problem. And I used to have many fellows come down the river in their boats, and they put into our place. That's where because there was rapids further down, and they'd put in, and they'd come in, and I'd make them coffee, and there was always something freshly baked, you know, usually apple pie they'd be looking for. And I was well known for hot apple pie or fresh bread or buns, you know, and they'd have something to eat and have a good visit. And the Department of Highways guys used to do the same thing. They used to drive in, do the circle, plow out my roads, you know, and then they'd stop and they'd come in and I'd have coffee for them and something to eat, you know, and they'd have a visit and off they'd go again. Yeah. So no, there was, it was hard times, but they were good times, really good times. Yeah.
It seems that way. And I know that you were really involved with the United Church for many years.
Oh yes.
Member UCW?
Oh yes, I still am. Yes.
Yeah. How long have you been
They're
involved
having
with the
a
church?
tea bake sale
Yes.
next week.
That's right. How long have you been involved with the church?
Oh, 30 some years. Right after I moved here, I hadn't been able to go to church when I was out at Donald because I didn't have transportation in those days. And my kids used to go to Sunday school all the time with Larwells to the Free Methodist Church. And they had a Volkswagen. I don't know if you remember.
No.
A little Volkswagen car, And they'd go off to church on Sunday. And they'd load up with kids and they'd just pack that car. I mean, it's against the law to do it now. But in those days, there was kids on kids on kids on kids sitting on top of each other, but they had a whale of a time. And they loved every minute of it, And it never hurt them at all. And also the sisters from the Catholic Church used to go out to Donald all the time and have catechism lessons, And my kids all went to catechism, the ones that were going to the Donald School, That was another wonderful thing at Donald, was the Donald School. The teachers there were amazing. And Emery's, Mary Ann and Lee Emery, and them in particular, they were so good. In fact, Nora still keeps in touch with Mary Ann Emery, Yeah. But it was a wonderful school. And when Walter first went to school there, when we first lived there, it was just a one-room schoolhouse. And Walter was a terrible student. He was bad all the time, when he started school. He was always bad. And Mrs., what was her name? She had been a teacher up in the Blayberry for years and years in the old schoolhouse up there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of her name. But anyway, she came to Donald that year that they decided to build a new school there. So she taught for 2 years there. But she did more with those kids than any teacher does today. They learned to read and write properly, and discipline was top priority, And Walter settled down, and he did well with her, Yeah.
When you lived at...
Mrs. Behrens, her name
Oh,
was.
yes, Mrs.
Remember
Behrens.
Mrs. Behrens?
Yes. Yeah, of
That
course.
Scotch lady.
Yeah. When you lived in Donald, was there a store there at the time that you lived there?
Oh my gosh,
And-
Donald was a town then.
Yeah.
Yes, oh yeah, there was a store. What was her name? It's the one that owned the Trapper.
Osachuk.
They had a store there. And
Mr. and Mrs. Osachuk?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
Mr. and Mrs. Osachuk, I think.
it was a Chuck,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
And she fell through the front porch, the veranda on the store, and broke her hip.
Oh, my.
And she was never good after that. That was, she went downhill from then on. Yeah, it wasn't long after that she died. But yeah, they had a great store there, general store, But I mean, there was it was a whole town, all kinds of houses there, and lots of people lived there, and yeah, it was great. Yeah, the church had been moved. You had to go into town to the church. But well, you know the story of the churches. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but there was hall there where they used to hold dances all the time, and you know, and the kids, they put on their Christmas concerts there, and you know, I can still remember Jeff up there just having putting on a great performance, you know. And then after the new school was built, I got the job of custodian at the Donald School. And my husband bought me a car, and I learned to drive, and it was wonderful, you know. The other thing I used to do too was, even before I drove, I used to read the water for the water resources at the bridge, and we got a radio phone then, so I could phone in the readings every day, you know. And oh my gosh, what a luxury that was, you know, having that radio phone there and being able to hear from people and hear what was going on all over the valley, you know, and yeah. It was
Yeah,
great.
because you were quite isolated where
Oh,
you
we
were.
were
There
very
wasn't
isolated.
anybody even
It
close
was
to
a
you.
mile and a quarter walk down to the bridge. Yeah. And I used to do that every morning, walk down there to read the water. And the dogs would go with me, and my husband would go out first, and if he saw any signs of bears or anything, he'd radio back and say, "You take the dogs with you." I saw a bear down in the bush, you know, and I'd take the dogs with me, but usually they went with me anyway, you know, they'd follow me. But, and I never had any trouble. Yeah, but no. I got to know the water resources girls in Vancouver very well, talking to them every day, you know. I knew what was going on in Vancouver better than I knew what was going on in Golden.
Yeah. So on your farm out there, you did you garden?
Oh, I had a big garden, yeah. Yeah, big garden, and we had pigs and horses, and we had a pet pig who, it's funny because my great-granddaughter was here last week with two of her friends from the school, and apparently she'd been telling them some stories that I had told over the years about the pet pig. He used to come and he'd sit on the back step, and you know, heaven help any of the kids if they had a cookie or anything, he'd steal their cookies. Or we had an old fellow that used to chop my wood for me, and he'd bring his lunch and he'd put it on the windowsill, the kitchen windowsill. And that pig would take that lunch every time. And you'd see him trotting off across the field, you know, and this old guy running after him trying to get his lunch back.
That must have been a sight.
He was so funny, yeah, funny old pig. Yeah. And of course they had their own little rodeos all the time, you know, out there, and they had a snow machine in the winter that they rode around the field in and jumped the fence, you know, and because the snow would be so high that there was hardly any fence, so they'd just go right over, you know.
Yeah. Sounds like a great place to raise kids.
Oh, it was wonderful. They said they hated it, but they didn't. They loved it, you know. They had lots of chores to do because we had lots of animals. But it was, you know, they got off that bus at night, they came in, they had their supper, they went did their chores, and then they did their homework, and they were tired, they were ready for bed. You know, even when they were teenagers, they had their chores to do before they did anything else, you know. They weren't allowed to go into town unless they had a reason, you know, even after they were in high school. And yeah, Gary my son-in-law used to come out to get Mickey. And she wasn't allowed to go until she had done all her chores. Yeah.
Well, that didn't deter him anyway because he
Oh no,
he hung in there, didn't he?
persevered, and they got married, and yeah.
And they've been married a long time as well.
Oh yeah, a long time. Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. She's 42, so yeah,
Yeah, long time.
yeah.
So, Other than that, what kind of activities was your husband? We talked about him doing his barbecues, but was he involved in any?
Yeah, he was running for alderman actually when he was so sick.
Oh,
And he wanted to, he campaigned and everything, and he was very sick and ended up in the hospital, so he couldn't do it, but he would have loved to. Yeah.
yeah. And he was so well known in Golden and so
Oh, yeah.
respected that I'm sure that he would have
Oh,
won
yeah.
a seat handily.
I'm sure he would have, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, he was a really good person.
yeah.
Helped a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard lots of really good things about him. I knew who he was for sure, and
Yeah.
yeah. I remember there was one summer that it seemed like everywhere we went, every weekend we went someplace, there he was with a roast on a barbecue.
Barbecuing.
Yes.
It's funny because Tracy, my granddaughter, her biggest goal in life was to learn how to barbecue a roasted beef like her grandfather did. So I had to show her and what he did with the beef and everything. And now every once in a while she'll put a roast on and barbecue and bring over a great big piece, But even Eli, until he died, when he barbecued, he'd always send me a big hunk of beef over.
Aw,
It
that's
was
nice.
so nice. And,
Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So are you willing to share that secret with us? What did he do to the beef?
Rubbed it with lots of garlic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and salt and pepper, and yeah, it's basically very simple, but the garlic really, and it was the cooking time too.
Mm-hmm.
The long, slow cooking,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just care.
And the cuts of beef, is very particular about what cut of beef he used. Yeah, wasn't just any old
Cut of beef. Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. It's just like it was. I'm tasting it right now.
Oh, it was so good, yeah, so good, and the baked beans too. Oh, I have to tell you about the baked beans that are still buried out at the farm.
Yes, please.
He used to bake beans all the time on the barbecue, right? Well, he heard that, if you dug a pit and put a fire in the bottom of the pit and put the crocks, and we had 2 huge big crocks, put the crocks down in the pit and covered them all up, and then just left them there for 2 days, they'd be cooked.
Mm.
Okay, so he did that, and then the day of the barbecue, he uncovers them all, and they're all sour.
Oh no.
So what he did was just covered them all up, and they're still buried out there.
Oh, that's the best.
I can tell you right where they are, but I know the people that bought the place, I told her that story, and she said, well, you'll have to show me where they are. We'll have to dig them up. But those crocks were worth a fortune.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Because he bought them at a antique store.
Yes.
You can't buy.
No.
I had small crocks for years that we used to bake beans in. In fact, the girls have them all. They use them for planters now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And what about social activities in Golden? Was there any social activities that you
Oh.
took part in that you really appreciated?
Oh yeah, we used to go to the New Year's dance all the time, and there was the Legion was a very good place to go to. There was always entertainment there on Saturday night, and I never liked the Legion myself. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. But I wasn't a drinker,
Yep.
and it was hard for me to sit there and watch them all drinking, especially on New Year's Eve. It would bother me. And I'd always go and hide in the washroom at 12 o'clock because I didn't want to kiss all those
Yep.
I don't blame you.
No, they
guys.
lied.
I can name a few.
No, please don't.
But you know, it was a good time for everybody. They had a good time there, and yeah, and the New Year's dances too, you know, yeah, yeah. I was used to get a kick out of Beta Fuse. You know, she always was dressed to the nines. She had beautiful things, you know. And this one New Year's she came and her husband had given her a fur coat for Christmas. And it had a bottom that zipped off, you know.
Yep.
And she was so proud of that fur coat, you know. And everybody was ohing and awing, you know.
Yeah.
But poor Beta, right up until the time, well, the last time I saw her was at the post office, and somehow or other she heard about my memoirs that I had written, and she said, "I want to read your memoirs." And I said, "Well, why? You know, well, because I hear they're so good, you know." And I was still working on them then, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I said to her, "Well, when they're done, but at that time I thought I wasn't going to let them go to anybody, you know, that they were for my kids more than anybody else. Today I don't really, it doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
But at that time I just kind of wanted them for my kids, and
Mm-hmm.
but she was bound and determined she was going to read them.
And she was very strong-willed.
Oh, you better believe it.
Yeah. So if she wanted something, she probably
Oh,
worked
she
really
usually
hard to
got
get
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I remember the best about Beta is that she was a tatter. She would tat. And she taught my mom to tat when my mom was,
Yes.
you know, in her early 60s.
Oh, she was a beautiful dancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember her on the dance floor.
Yeah.
You know, oh, really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she was quite a lady.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and May Days. Did you ever take part in any of the May Day
No,
celebrations?
but Mickey was May Day Queen once,
Was she?
1 year. Hmm. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the year, but she was in high school,
Hmm.
and yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, they're...
that was quite a. And the other thing that we always took part in was the Santa Claus parade. Russell was Santa Claus 1 year, and Jeff they always used our sleigh, you know. We had a beautiful old sleigh, and our horse always pulled the sleigh, and Jeff always drove the horse, you know. And
Mhm.
yeah, I've got an old paper somewhere with a picture of them on the front page, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best thing about living in Golden?
The best thing is the people, the community. People are so good here, so caring, and you know, wonderful neighbors, and yeah, I've got Robert and Phyllis next door, and they're just such good people, you know, and yeah.
We
Yeah.
were over this past week and chatted with them too.
Who?
Robert and Phyllis.
Oh, you were talking to them?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
nice.
yeah,
I was
it
wondering
was.
if, yeah, because I'm sure they could tell you lots of stories too.
Oh, Robert had some great stories, and
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I worked with them, you know,
Yeah.
in the school when I was custodian.
Yeah.
We always did all the cleaning in the summer together.
Mhm.
All the custodians would get together and we'd do all the schools. And that's when I first knew them.
Oh,
And of course, they were Ginny and Leif's neighbors at Haybart
Oh yes.
for many years until
Many
they
years.
moved in here, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
no, they're good neighbors.
We asked Robert if he would try and use his memory to help us remember some of the old bachelors that other people in the community weren't privy to, or whatever the information, because some of those old bachelors had nobody to remember them.
That's right.
And when we arrived to do the interview, he had a piece of paper
Yeah.
with names on it on the full
no.
one side and flipped over, and
Yeah.
names on the other side
No
too.
doubt. Oh, my
Yeah,
gosh, yeah.
so it was really great because he did, he really put some thought into it, and he remembered people that I hadn't even heard of.
Is that right?
In 25 years at the museum this year, I thought I'd heard of everybody, but nope.
Well, did you ever hear of old Mike Chobator out at the farm?
No.
Oh, okay. he owned the property next to our property. And he lived in an old log cabin. And just a one-room cabin. And it had bars on the windows to keep the bears out. And there was a stream right outside his front door. And that's where he got his water. And he grew strawberries all in there. But he was in his late 70s when we moved out there. And he had come from Romania in 1919 after the uprising in Romania. And he had never heard from his family since the time he came to Canada. And he had a gold mine up in the mountain behind his place, and there wasn't enough gold there to make it worthwhile, you know. But he had gold teeth, both top and bottom.
Wow.
And he could tell you stories about this valley, you know, in this town, like you wouldn't believe. And but anyway, as he got older, Leo used to go over there all the time. From the time we moved there, Leo was 16 when we moved there, and Leo used to ride over because he used to go into town twice a year. Oh, Big Mike did. We called him Big Mike, and just to get enough groceries to do him, you know, for the winter or for the summer or whatever. And that was the only time he left his place. And so Leo would go over and see if he needed anything or if he was all right, you know, and that. And then Leo would take him into town if he needed to go and whatever. And then we moved him over to, Dick Gondik had some cabins in Donald. So he offered him a cabin in Donald. So he moved in there because he was getting pretty bad. You know, he was nearly 80 then, and he wasn't very well. So he stayed there for, I think, about a year, and he wasn't happy there at all. He didn't like it in the town of Donald at all. So then we moved him to our place. We had a cabin on the place and right near the house. And we moved him there, and I would go over all the time and make sure, you know, take him food over and look after him. But he'd leave the doors open, let the birds all fly in, and they'd nest up in the ceiling of the the cabin, and they'd poop all over the place. But he was the only man I ever saw that could chew snooze and gum at the same time.
Oh my goodness, what a combination.
And he'd spit, you know, and he had a cupboard that was beside his chair, and all down the side of it would be spit, you know. And I'd clean that every week, you know.
Oh boy, you were a good friend.
Yes, that's for sure.
And I'd go in there once a week and give it a good clean, you know, and clean up all the bird poop, and of course he'd let all the dogs in, you know, and he'd sit there with them all up on his bed, and but he was a wonderful old man. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot about him in the museum.
I can't say I've ever even heard his name before.
Really?
So yes, so I appreciate you
Did you ever
sharing
hear
this
of
with
Little
me.
Mike?
No.
Little Mike, well, he lived in the cabin after Big Mike moved out. And his wife was a prostitute.
Oh.
Yeah. And they had a son. And he would see her coming down the road about once a month. And she just opened my back door and pushed the kid in. And when she first did it, he was about 2 years old. And she'd just take off and come to town. And she'd be in town for about 10 days. And the little guy would be with me the whole time. And she did that until, well, I don't know where, she went off to Vancouver, I think. And he got sick, and so, but anyway, I hadn't seen him for years. And then his dad died, and they had the funeral at our church. And when the choir came in and went up into the choir loft, here he was, you know, sitting in the front seat. And he saw me, and the tears just streamed, and he started to grin, you know, and he was like, I would say it was about 30 then. And, but after the funeral, he came and he gave me a big hug, and he was so happy to see me. And he told me, he said, you know, the happiest years of my life were spent at your house.
Aw.
And he said, the memories that I have there are just amazing. He said, if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have gone to school. As it was, he went to university. He got his degree. He was working for Indian Affairs because his mother was native. And he was working for the government, Indian Affairs, and had done well for himself. And I told him, I said, I'm so proud of you. You know, I appreciate that so much. And he said, well, it's all you're doing. He said, and the example that your kids set for me, you know. And they just welcomed him like he was another member of the family, you know.
Yeah.
Poor little guy. Yeah.
You've touched a lot of lives along the way, you and your children. And
We sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sure did. Yeah. Yeah.
great example.
Well, by example, or we tried, you know.
Yeah.
Just our lifestyle and, yeah. Yeah.
When you first came into Golden, what kind of stores were there for you to shop at?
Oh, Casey's. Was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mrs. Casey, she was so good. And Mr. Casey, you know. Old Casey. And no, other than that, then as time went on, Barlow's came. And it was an amazing store. I loved that store. Yeah. And no, and the hardware store, you know. I always used to love them. They were still good friends, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I always thought that everything we needed was right here.
We didn't have to look for anything.
No.
No.
And what we couldn't find right here, we didn't have to leave town for. We could order it from the catalog.
Oh yeah. I still order from the catalog.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
We were talking with Polly Potter and Betty Holland about their story, and they were saying that, was it their mum or their grandmom? I think it was their
Could
mum.
be either. Could be either.
Yeah, I think it was their mum who had never left Golden until she was 50. Like, not outside of town limits until she was 50.
Yeah,
And
I
then
know.
it was because I think Betty's boyfriend had a car, and he took them for a ride out to Moberly.
Yeah.
And when they asked her why she never left Golden, she said that everything she needed was
Why?
right here.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah. And I can certainly understand how she felt about it.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's-
This
yeah.
is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like to go to the city at all.
I never was very fussy about it. After we moved here, you know, I did go in once in a while, but not very often.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
we never went from Donald very much,
No.
and even now I won't go unless I absolutely have to. You know, in fact, I won't go. Period. I have a pacemaker actually, and they gave me put a new pacemaker in that can be checked on the phone now. So I don't have to go in to have it checked.
Yeah.
They just
That's
check it on the
awesome.
phone, and
Yeah.
saves me a trip into Calgary, which I didn't want to do anyway.
No, I can understand that. And you're sharing today with us a story of your time on the farm, which we're going to take back to the museum and put into our records there. And
Okay.
we really appreciate your time today in this
Yeah,
conversation.
no problem. I've enjoyed it.
Good. We're going to take a clip out of this conversation to put into a larger film that we
Okay.
will show here in Golden probably
Oh, neat.
end of May or middle of June.
Okay.
We'll try and have it ready, and we'll make sure you know when it's going to be
Yes.
on, so you can come if you're able, and we'll also make you a copy of the DVD, the film that we've done today,
Okay.
so that you can have it to
Okay,
share
well,
with your
I'm sure.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kids would love to see it.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to add before we stop today?
No, just that, we've had a good life here, and we, I especially love the people of Golden.
Yeah.
And,
too.
you know, I've got care workers that are so wonderful. I couldn't wish for better care than what I have, you know, and I mean, where else could you find that, you know? No, and they all know me and know my history and, you know, more or less, and if they don't, like there was a new little student that came last night with the care worker, she's just learning, and she couldn't get over the pictures. She had to look at all the pictures and, you know. And she just was so enthralled with it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, we're very fortunate.
I think we are too. We live in a great place.
Oh, a wonderful place to
Yeah.
live and to raise your family, and, you know,
Yeah.
we're just so blessed. And
We really are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Audrey.
You're welcome. My pleasure.